Well, welcome everyone. We have a nice big group here today for Robin's wonderful session on AI, which we're all keen to learn more about so that we don't get conned, among other things. I also just want to take a moment, and I think we have some people from BC here today, and I just want to say to you how sorry all of us are for the horrible tragedy that happened in British Columbia and how we're all thinking about you and holding you in our thoughts. So, as I begin, I'm just delighted to introduce Robin. Robin has been very kind in agreeing to do this session for us, and we're very pleased to have her because she is an expert on this. She is an associate professor at the University of Michigan School of Information. In 2021, she co-founded the Accessibility, HCI, and Aging Lab in the school's Department of Computer Science and Engineering and Stamp School of Art and Design. She holds affiliate positions in the Center for Ethics, Society, and Computing, the Digital Studies Institute, and the Michigan Center on the Demography of Aging, as well as the Institute for Healthcare Policy and Innovation. She's worked at Google as a visiting researcher and held user experience research positions at Microsoft Research, Facebook, and IBM Research. She's received several awards and fellowship, too many to mention, in this short introduction. Her PhD in technology and social behavior is from Northwestern University. She designs, builds, and studies systems to better support technology use and non-use by older adults and people with vision impairments. There's a great deal more that I could add, but suffice it to say that Dr. Brewer is a very accomplished academic, and we're delighted to have her join us today to discuss the uses and cautions related to artificial intelligence. So over to you, Robin.
All right. Thank you, Trish, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me today. I see a Go Blue in the chat. Don't worry if you have to leave early. I shouldn't take the full time. I wanted to leave some time for questions because I know this is a topic where folks may have lots of questions. If you do have questions, feel free to start to add them to the chat. If it makes sense for me to respond to them during the talk, I will do so. If not, I might wait until afterwards and do more of a longer Q&A. So today I'm going to be talking about AI, what it is, what you can do with it, maybe what you might not want to do with it, and just try to demystify the area of artificial intelligence with some examples, not only from my own research here at the University of Michigan, but others' work as well in this space. So I'll just get started, and this is what everyone is here for, right? Explaining just what is AI. It stands for artificial intelligence. And then the question is, well, we know what artificial is, fake, right? But what about intelligence? What's that intelligence part? Well, the intelligent half of artificial intelligence essentially means using a lot of data about things that have already happened to learn and make guesses about what should happen next. So some people within the AI field joke that because of this essentially a prediction process, AI really is just a fancy phrase or acronym for applied statistics. So if there are any math folks out there, stats fans, you will get what I'm saying. But I just want to give some examples of what I mean by using data to predict some type of result. So for example, AI can use data about what type of music you have listened to in the past or what other people similar to you have listened in the past, have played in the past to recommend songs that you might want to listen to, right? It's also being used to learn about health trends like the flu, studying lots of data about heart rate and sleep patterns from smartwatches to predict where the next flu outbreak will occur. Those map apps on your phone use AI to take lots of data about traffic and how long it has taken someone to get from point A to point B to predict how long it will take you to get from point A to point B, and just plan the optimal driving route. And one that we'll talk a little bit more about today is how AI answers questions that people have with chatbots. But I'm going to save that for a little bit later. Just some general stats about AI. So statistics and reports show that younger people are more likely to be aware of AI. Now, I'll put that with a caveat because I'll explain a little bit later how this awareness doesn't necessarily translate to use. So younger people are more likely to be aware of AI. And the chart on this screen is showing the percentage of adults surveyed in the United States from Pew Research who said that they have heard or read something about AI. And it shows that 62%, this top row here, the very top row, 62% of adults ages 18 to 29 have heard a lot about AI compared to, I'm going to skip 30 to 49, but compared to just 42% of adults ages 50 to 64, or even just 32% of adults over the age of 65. So we go from more than half in 18 to 29 age groups to closer to a third for those over the age of 65. Now, if you're seeing this chart, you might assume that those over 65 or even those over 50 are not using AI, but this is actually not true. So I partnered with the National Poll on Healthy Aging to survey adults over the age of 50 in the United States. We had a few thousand people who completed this survey. And from that, we found that actually more than half of the people surveyed have used AI. So they're mostly using AI chatbots and voice assistants, but they're also using AI to receive health information or for social connections. And so I had put that caveat earlier that just because reports are showing that maybe people, maybe older people may be less aware of AI, they're still using it. It just might not be obvious that they're using AI. So this is kind of signaling a gap between awareness and use. It just might not be obvious. So I want to take a few moments to share some examples of AI technologies that you might already be using and just not know it, right? And how they're connected to AI. So first up is voice assistants. So consider if you have even used any of these or you currently use any of them. Voice assistants like Siri or Alexa, where you're talking to a speaker, a device, or you might be having it embedded into your cell phone and asking questions using your voice. They use AI in the form of speech recognition algorithms. So it's essentially using lots of data about individual sounds to predict which sounds correspond to words and then be able to translate those words into something that it can respond to. So in terms of voice assistants, about 50% of those that we had surveyed said that they have used voice assistants. Next up is wearables. So if you use something like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, some type of activity tracker, you are essentially using AI already. So these wearables use lots of sensor data, both from you and from other people around the world, to learn patterns, for example, in heart rate and predict whether someone is walking, whether they're doing some type of fast-paced exercise, whether they're sleeping, or even whether they're experiencing an abnormal heartbeat and there might be some type of emergency. So think about whether you use AI in the form of wearables. From this survey, we're seeing that nearly a third of those who we surveyed are using wearable devices. Up next, we have smart security systems, AI-powered security systems, and increasingly these security systems that have cameras on doorbells or cameras around the home, both inside and outside. They're incorporating facial and object recognition. So they're using lots of data about people's faces and animals, animal faces, bodies to predict whether the object at your door is someone that you know, or a stranger, or simply an animal who is too close to the camera, and then give you a little notification about that. And then in terms of how many people are using these types of systems, we have slightly more than the wearables. About 35% of those over the age of 50 surveyed said that they are using these AI-powered security systems. And lastly, we have AI that's being used to complete home tasks, such as power a thermostat or control the lights in the home, play music. And so an example of how AI is used in this case is it can detect environment lighting data in real time, for example, a light bulb, and adjust the amount of natural light or the color of the light. These AI home task devices can also adjust your settings and adjust the light intensity automatically without you having to state or tell it what to do. And this was a little less common. To about 26% of those surveyed said that they currently or have ever used some type of AI-powered home task device. Okay. And so the reason that I'm bringing this up is that AI powered devices, you can buy them and you may or may not find them useful. And so in this survey, we also asked people about their usefulness. We asked how useful were each of those four technologies in the chart on the previous slide. How useful were these technologies for living independently and safely at home, which I'm very aware is a goal of Seniors Action Ontario. So I wanted to at least present some of what we have started to find here. And of the four technologies, so we had the voice assistants, the wearables, the home security systems, and the home task devices. Of those four devices, two of them were actually described to be very useful by the people that we had surveyed. So voice assistants and home security devices were seen as most useful for independent living. Specifically, 80% of the voice assistant users said that they found voice assistants helpful for independent living, and nearly all, so 96% of the home security devices were described as being useful. So how might they be useful? One, for example, home security devices, there are many brands. There's Reolink, Ring, Eufy. They might be helpful for detecting darkness and turning on floodlights at night. AI doorbells can notify whether someone that you know is at your front door or not. Security systems with cameras can alert you to whether packages have been left at your door, which is helpful, but it can also alert you if someone takes away that package, is stealing that package, whether it has been removed. We also see voice assistants, and there are many types of voice assistants. Some are ones that have a screen, like the one on the slide, the Google Nest Hub, and some don't have a screen. They look like speakers with essentially no display on the front. So how might they be useful? Oh no, there's something weird happening with the slides. I'll just describe how might they be useful. They could be useful to turn. You can kind of see this on the image on the slide. Play music. They can be used to turn lights on or off, to control timers, set timers for you to view the weather. You can also use them without the screen by speaking and having them play different routines. So for example, when I leave the home, if I'm going on vacation or if I'm leaving even for a few hours and I have a dog and a cat and I might want to turn the lights on, I might say, hey, speaker name, I'm going out for a few hours. And then I would program that I'm going out for a few hours to automatically turn off the lights. automatically turn on the lights at a specific time, to play music for pets, so that it sounds like someone's home from the outside. And then even for the pets on the inside, they feel like someone is home. So there are ways that you can program these different routines that can control more than just one activity at a time. It's not just controlling lights, but it's controlling lights, music, and it might even control the thermostat in the home. So I have on the screen here a Google Nest Hub. They range in size, and again, they range in having a display or not a display. But they also range in price. So some of these can be kind of pricey. And so an even cheaper option to voice assistants has emerged in the world of AI within the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years, since 2020, 2021 or so. And that is the chatbot. So instead of only speaking to these devices, you can also type as well. And so we're seeing media discuss pros, cons, open questions of chatbots. You might have heard in the media about ChatGPT or Gemini. Some good things, some not so great things. I've added a few screenshots on the slide here. For example, will chatbots like ChatGPT keep your secrets safe? They're changing how people search online. They are affecting boundaries for using them for health advice. Chatbots are connected to political persuasion. So I just wanted to spend the rest of our time today talking about these AI chatbots and maybe giving a few a try. So I'll explain exactly how these chatbots work a little later, but I thought the easiest way to understand them actually is to see how people use them. And so one of the most common AI chatbots is called ChatGPT. But a lot of research, unfortunately, focuses only on how younger people use ChatGPT and these AI chatbots. We don't know a lot about how older people use ChatGPT. So a researcher who was in my research lab, Dr. Novia Narain, led a study with 24 adults over the age of 60 and asked them to use ChatGPT for 2 weeks. And in the first week, they could ask about anything that they wanted. And in the second week, we gave them specific themes to focus on each day, like healthy aging or planning or seeking advice or technology. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, we analyzed the data about how people were using ChatGPT. Now, there are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, there's probably about 15 different topics, some that were related to health, some were not related to health, that participants used ChatGPT for. And I think it will get very overwhelming if I try to present all 15 of these today. So instead, I want this to be more of a choose your own adventure presentation. So I'm going to read through all of the possible topics, but if there's one that you want me to expand on and go into a little bit more depth, type it into the chat box or the chat window in Zoom. And then I will go to that particular slide and we can go in depth into one of these topics. If you don't have any preference, I can just choose a random one, but I think it's more fun if these are topics that you actually want to hear about. So of the topics that were not related to health, there's planning, advice, entertainment, learning skills, explanations, conversations and relationships, technology, and some aging specific searches. And then of those related to health, we have definitions, effects, advice, nutrition, and some that are aging specific. So I see there's already some in the chat window, conversations and relationships from Trish. I'll go to that one. Then we'll go to technology. Anne Marie, I'm going to ask if could you specify if your aging specific category is the one that's not related to health or that is related to health. And then I see that there is one related to planning. Okay. Oh, aging related to both. Okay, thank you. So let me actually go to, we'll start at the top here, conversations and relationships. So I'll try maybe the first five and then we'll see if we want to do any more. But conversations and relationships. So this was not health related. And these are just some examples of how people were using ChatGPT. Um, they were asking conversation related advice. So, for example, one person said, what are three interesting science facts that I could say to impress someone? Another asked, what is the best way to tell a good friend that you don't want to publicly support his son politically? So, maybe getting into a tricky personal situation that they're not sure how to approach. Another is write a funny speech for my brother-in-law's 70th birthday. And then lastly, we have how do you approach a feuding sibling? So some of these are more lighthearted and others are more about some topics that might introduce some tension in a relationship and they're unsure how to approach it. Okay, let me go see some others. We have one, a vote for technology questions. So actually ChatGPT is interesting. You'll see some of my qualms later about AI and kind of when you should use it versus not use it. But I will say that asking it questions about technology is interesting because it is technology itself. And we see how people were using it almost as a form of tech support to recommend steps, videos, or products, since there's a lot of data about product information widely available online. So we see how to decide on a new smartphone, what's the state of technology, how to install a TV mount. We have one person asking ChatGPT to basically take role play, take on the role of X type of career or personality. So act as an IT specialist who is my friend, right? So I'm not just an IT specialist, but someone who's going to deliver something kindly and then ask for recommendations about an operating system that is going out of service. We have questions about transferring data, how to set up cheap streaming services, and then asking about, actually, I think that might be a copy and paste it from one of these other slides. I'm wondering if it's financially feasible to stay in my home. So that's not technology related. I think that was from maybe the advice or the aging specific one as an accident. But you can see that there are a range of technology related topics or entries that people were asking to ChatGPT. All right, so I think that's two. Let me scroll up here and see others. Okay, now I'm actually going to do, just because all of the ones we have so far are related to, not related to health, I'm going to do aging specific that is related to health, just so you can see a little bit of the difference. So we have some entries asking to define healthy aging. So what does healthy aging look like? What's the best food for healthy aging? Asking about exercise ideas. So how much exercise should I undertake once I'm over 80? How often and for how long is it recommended to do physical activities if you are female and 68 years old? And then also some diet and nutrition actually ideas that are specific to older age, such as how do I lose weight over 60? What should someone over 65 eat to help with arthritis, etc. So I won't read all of them, but these are just some on the screen. Let me go back to the main menu. So I think that's three. Let's do two more. Planning housing. I think actually, David, that one corresponds, I think that was under aging specific, yes. That was under aging specific non-health. So you can see a little bit of difference of the aging specific health and aging specific non-health. This is not related to health, but it is asking about home planning. I'm a widow, I'm wondering if it's financially feasible to stay in my home. And then we have a more specific question. How is the amount of required minimum distribution calculated on a 401k, so retirement? when a person turns 73 years old. Can you show me an example of how it's calculated on $100,000? Or how to earn extra money as a senior? Some of those are housing specific. And then we have asking questions about pros and cons of living in different places. Where can I get certified? What are some ways to make friends with other seniors in different social environments? Okay, I think aging related to both affects the environment. Okay, so I think those were, are there any other topics? And then I'll actually get to some of what Linda and Diane, Daniela are saying, Amanda, about avoiding manipulations, kind of the dangers of using it as well. Are there any other topics that I have not gotten to on the slide that someone would like for me to get to? Oh, here's one. I'm actually, so there's one from Diane about creative writing. I think that one is under, can't remember if it's under entertainment or learning skills. Under entertainment. So there were some ways that people were using ChatGPT for entertainment, for example, recommending movies or shows, telling jokes, engaging in creative writing or design, or playing games. But I wanted to get to this second chunk down here that is related to creative writing. So P7 had typed in, could you write a children's book with illustrations about a boy named Freddie? He should be involved in some kind of adventure and maybe even be a hero. I think this particular participant had said that they were trying to generate some story ideas to share with their grandchildren. And then there's some examples of people creating poetry. So create a poem from the following words, or using AI to create poetry. Um, Providing words, crisp, dark soil, old barn, etc., and saying create a poem with these words, right? Right. So there were a range of ways that people were using AI in this study. So thank you for suggesting topics. Um, for the purpose of time and to be able to, I'm going to do a brief demo. I see that there were some suggestions of questions to ask in the chat. I want to do a brief demo and get to Q&A. But before doing that, I want to share a little bit more about AI. So I've talked about the ways that older people in our study, our 2-week study, were using AI, but as was kind of hinted to in the chat, it's important to learn that there are also risks to using AI. And this is learning about risks is a common request amongst older people, or amongst those 50 and up. So 81% of those who we had surveyed want to learn more about AI risks. There's a lot in the media about you should use AI, or even lots of computers and phones are now building AI into their operating systems so that you're using it automatically. And there's less about the risks, except maybe some of the very scary things that you're hearing in media. And so one thing that's related to risk is how these AI chatbots are responding to the questions that people are asking. So our research group, at least what I presented, was presenting the questions that people asked and less of the responses that ChatGPT gave. And our research group is in the process of analyzing the response data, but we are expecting to see some responses that ChatGPT gives that are incorrect. So one downside of ChatGPT is that it does not admit when it's wrong. Sometimes it doesn't even know when it's wrong. There have been media articles about when AI goes wrong, naming these types of errors AI hallucinations, how ChatGPT gave incorrect answers about how to vote, and how it provides false information about people. There's also articles about AI scams getting smarter. That's a little bit less related to ChatGPT, but very relevant for seniors around the world, really. And so, what I wanted to do is take a few steps back and just explore why does this happen? How does this happen and what you can do about it. And essentially, it goes back to how AI works, right? So at the very beginning of this presentation, I said AI is basically a fancy phrase for applied statistics. It's essentially making lots of predictions. So in the context of chat, it's using a lot of data to make predictions. This data is mostly from texts from other websites or in documents, but it can also include images and videos to make predictions about what comes next. So for example, um, the prediction that a chatbot might make if someone types in once upon a blank and then asks a question about what comes next, then it's extremely likely that the expected next word is time, once upon a time. There's lots of data about storytelling on the internet, and once upon a is usually preceded by the word time. However, there are many cases where what the next word is a bit more ambiguous and open to interpretation, such as what comes next in the sentence, the students opened their blank, right? The blank could be they opened their books, they opened their laptops, they opened their minds, right? It could be a lot of next words. So this means that ChatGPT might produce a sentence that looks right, but has some incorrect information. Now, what can you do about that? What do you do knowing that chatbots like ChatGPT or Gemini, essentially AI generated information can be wrong? Now, your first instinct may be to never use it as long as you live, which is a valid option, right? You can decide, I don't want to use this. This is not for me. This is confusing or this is overwhelming. But I think what the research community is trying to get people to do is to get them to use AI in smart ways. Um, and so, what are those smart ways? One is to ask for its sources, right? So, on the slide here is a screenshot from a different chatbot called Gemini, which is Google's version of ChatGPT. And I asked it for the best things to do in Ontario. And there are these three dots that I can double click at the end of the response, and it provides some options once I click those three dots, one of which is double check response. When I click double check response, it then provides sources down here in green, provides sources for what it recommended, the website sources. So it says Google search found similar content like this. And then I can go to that specific search page, exclusiveresorts.com. Um, and the green means that this content is verifiable from other websites. There's also yellow, meaning there were a few other websites that verified this content, and there might be some websites that said the opposite, and then it might be show in red, showing that well, we didn't find any sources to support this argument. So you can ask for sources, and if there are any former teachers out there, it's like asking the chatbot to show its work. You can ask for sources to counterbalance some of the negative effects of the chatbot output. Or you can avoid using it for certain types of information, like not asking about anything too personal, especially since anything that you type is technically stored by and then owned by the company itself. Um, let's see. And one of the things that I really wanted to get across in this presentation today is that searching for information using an AI chatbot like ChatGPT or Gemini is different from searching on Google, for example. AI chatbots are predictions based on documents and text online, and Google search is going directly to that document or that text and finding the content. Now, what else can you do on these sites to prevent inaccurate information? Well, you can also report inaccurate information or tell the chatbot when it's wrong. There's usually some type of, and this is Gemini as well, some type of thumbs down icon after each response so that you can report that the information is not factually correct. It didn't follow the instructions that you gave it when you were searching. It's offensive or unsafe or uses the wrong language. Alternatively, you can type another response in the chat window to tell ChatGPT or Gemini that the information is wrong. And so what I want to do, actually, I think I might wait to do this demo until the very end. I'm going to take some, I think there were some suggestions of what to ask ChatGPT in the chat window. But if you have some ideas of what you might want to put into ChatGPT or into Gemini, type them in the chat window and I'll come back to them at the end of the presentation, just so we can see more of a live demo of what I was talking about in terms of asking for sources, reporting inaccurate information, and telling the chatbot that it's wrong. But what I want to do, make sure we have time to do, is to just wrap up with um, just some kind of more contextual information about AI that's zooming out a little bit more. So I kind of started this presentation with the good of AI. Older people are using it. It might not be obvious. There are all these different ways that you can use it, from nutrition to planning trips to planning conversations, right? So starting with the good to moving to the, I'll say, bad, in a sense of it can be wrong and the potential for errors in AI output. But I wanted to end with kind of the ugly of AI, and that is less discussed in the media, and specifically that AI has some adverse impacts on communities and the environment. And let's just take chatbots as an example. Generating text, images, and videos with AI significantly impacts water, electricity, carbon dioxide emissions. One report estimates that using ChatGPT once uses 10 times more electricity than a Google search, because there are all of these data centers that have to power what happens in the background anytime someone enters a query or searches with one of these chatbots. And so, what do these environmental impacts mean? Well, in my opinion, it means if you're going to use AI, only use it when absolutely necessary. Be aware of some of the risks and use AI safely if you do plan to use it. There's a report that actually came out, I think, a couple of days ago, last week. I don't know what day of the week it is, unfortunately. It was the 12th, so last week, from AARP, which is an aging advocacy group in the United States. And it's about 6 ways to stay safe in a chatbot world that's specifically targeted to people over the age of 50, which I would highly recommend you reading. And then if you do want to read more about some of the non-technical impacts of AI and how it works in a I would say a less jargony context than say reading an academic paper, I recommend reading a few books. There's Kate Crawford's Atlas of AI. There's Mahumita Murdia's Code Dependent Living in the Shadow of AI. And then there's Kathy O'Neill's book, Weapons of Math Destruction. So I think I shared with Trish and Harry the links to these, the links to a lot of the reports in this in the chat. But if someone could also perhaps type, and you can also share these slides, Trish and Harry, if you
Yeah,
um,
we intend to.
you can share these slides with who's attending so you can see that.
Yeah, they're going to go out to everyone
Okay.
over the next few days.
Okay, perfect. But what I wanted to do before we officially, oh, there's a link to them. When you click them, it goes to a link. What I wanted to do before we wrap up is just to show an example of what these sites look like. So there's chatgpt.com. I can also type gemini.google.com, and let's see. Does anyone have a suggestion of something that we can ask? Oh, I see one actually from, I don't know if this was the first or maybe it's the last one. What is the meaning of life from Andrew? So what is the meaning of life? So existential. And I'm typing this into Gemini. So it gives a long response actually, and I probably won't read. Make sure this is showing. My screen is showing. So it gives a few different responses from different lenses. The existential view, it of course has the number 42, but existential, biological, connection, nihilistic, and then it asks a question, would you like to dive deeper or explore how different cultures throughout history have answered this question? I'm going to ask the same question actually to ChatGPT just so we can see if there is a difference in the response. So it acknowledges that there's no singular answer, but presents some options and then asks, are you asking from curiosity or because something in your life is making you question it? But what I wanted to show at the bottom is that you can do things like say this was a good response. You can say this was a bad response. You can even say try again. Um, so if we say, let's say I didn't like this response, I'll say it's a bad response. And then it'll ask me why I think it is a bad response. And I might say the style or the tone is not very conversational. So I'll click submit. Similarly, so I've switched tabs now back to the first version of this to Gemini. I can click those three dots and double check response. It's going to search on Google. It's evaluating the statements, preparing the results, and there's a check. So there are these colors now where some of the content was taken from websites. Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre, I'm not sure of that name, argued that existence precedes essence, quotes. And so you can go to the YouTube video where there's similar content. There's a Wikipedia page that it cites and something called dreamstime.com. So you can decide whether or not you trust these, but it's essentially showing that the content was found in other places online, right? So that's essentially a brief demo. Are there any other ways that people might want to? I'm not seeing any just from a quick scroll, but so that's just an example of how these chatbots work. I will take some questions, but what I want people to remember is that people of all ages use AI. AI is basically fancy statistics. It's making lots of predictions about what should come next based off of data online. I would not recommend using it for private information or important decision making, maybe something as lightweight as what is the meaning of life, but also know that it comes with risks, one of which is the content can be incorrect, another of which is environmental risks. So use caution and use when necessary. So I will now take a step back and answer any questions. Harry, how does Q&A work? Do I call on people who raise their hands or does someone else moderate that? Oh, you're muted.
Harry, do we want to do by raising hands?
Or Cicely,
Yeah,
you
if anybody
navigate
has a
that?
question, maybe raise your hand.
I see Daniela has a question. Daniela,
Okay.
what is your question?
Well, I work in the hospital context, and AI has been used in many, many ways. But I'm concerned about our scanners out there and using that technology. And the first thing I thought, we need regulations around this. This is, yeah, it's very scary, frankly, right? And that's sort of what I was hoping
Yeah.
we would discuss it. And maybe it is for the future. I think it definitely is. And yeah, but thank you so much for your presentation and well done. And yeah, just thank you.
Thank you. And actually, Daniela, you raise a good point around regulation. So there isn't a lot of regulation around AI globally. The EU, European Union, has the EU AI Act, which is probably the the only regulation that's out there that's enforceable right now, and probably the best that we have, but people
Can you
argue that
say
it's
that
a little
again,
bit on
please?
the vague side, and I'll put it in the EU AI Act. I'll put it in the chat window as well. What's happening in the
Okay,
United
thank you.
States is a little bit, you're welcome, is a bit unfortunate in that there were regulations under our last president around you need to share more about the risks of AI. It should be clear when something is generated by AI or human. Yes, but that language is now gone. Now favored by language prioritizing quote unquote innovation, which you can tell I am not a fan of. But what individual states are trying to do is pass their own AI legislation. So the state of California, the state of Colorado, New York. I think Colorado might be the most progressive in terms of its AI regulation. But there are lots of let's say researchers. There's lots of work going into AI regulation. It's just not um, as it's not official yet. Nothing is too enforceable. So hopefully there's more
No,
AI
and it's
regulation
going to be a
coming
long process.
soon. Yeah, it
I
is a
think
very
It'll be a
long.
long process,
Evelyn,
and
you had
it's
a question? Evelyn, you
Is
wanted
there
to
another
know
hand
if,
raised, Evelyn?
yeah, Evelyn had a question about whether Grok was similar to ChatGPT and these others.
So they're all similar. They're all fairly similar. Some of these different chatbots, some of them you can use more for images. There's Dolly, which is one. Some that you can use more for videos, but how they work in terms of they're basically using lots of data for prediction are fairly similar. The style of how they might respond can differ not only from one brand to the next, but also from different updates that the systems have. So, like OpenAI is a company that runs ChatGPT. ChatGPT version 3 is different from 3.5 in its conversational style. So they're all fairly similar in how they work. It's just that and as I was showing the examples of the what's the meaning of life from Gemini to ChatGPT, they're all fairly similar. They just might have some differences in the style in which they respond.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions? You can raise your hand if you have a question.
Actually, I'd like to make a question, Cecily. The other night, I can't remember if it was last night or the night prior, there was a CTV news segment on how using AI in place of doctor's visits, and that the outcome for most people was worse than if they had actually gone to see a doctor. So I'm just wondering if you had seen anything like that. People trying to use AI instead of actually seeing a doctor.
Well, I think so I have seen it not necessarily in place of seeing a doctor for something important, but there are healthcare companies in the United States are using these workflows because they're using workflows that involve AI for non-emergency topics. So, for example, if you need to ask your nurse a question about like, I don't know, I'm trying to think about rescheduling your next appointment, for example. Instead of calling in, you might be able to interact with the chatbot, and the chatbot can do that. Now, there are lots of cautions, and I don't know if it shows. I'm trying to show my screen again. Um, there are some cautions at the bottom. It's very hard to read this. I'm trying to zoom in. ChatGPT can make mistakes, check important information at the very bottom of the screen. Gemini is AI and can make mistakes. There are lots of caveats that these chatbots are making and to basically say, don't use it for anything important. We don't want to be liable for anything important, but healthcare companies are starting to use AI within their workflows. Now, one thing that I'm aware, at least in the US, that they're starting to use AI a lot more in the clinical setting for is note taking. So, physician note taking. I recently, well, actually, in August, I had a baby, and in September, I went to a follow-up visit, and the doctor said, "Hey, do you mind if I use AI to record the conversation and then it'll send you notes afterwards?" Now I said no, right? Because I am aware that maybe some sensitive topic content might be involved, and I don't want that in AI whatsoever. So I said no. But some people say yes, and what will happen is there will be a summary that's intended to save the physician's time in typing those into the system that will automatically go to you after the appointment. So I haven't seen it in terms of completely replacing medical professionals, but I have seen work about AI being used within the workflows with the clinicians themselves.
This was a report about people putting their symptoms into AI and then not getting proper medical care or medical care in time because they delayed based on what AI said.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. That's the biggest caution is don't use it for any important decision making, particularly health related decision making at the moment. Um, it could be correct in what it's saying, or it could be incorrect, and there's no real again, since there is no real regulation, who's liable for this information or for the output, we don't yet know. So if you're using it to say like plan a trip, or you're using it to um, navigate a difficult conversation and give you some ideas of conversation starters, or for entertainment purposes, right? Those lighter, more subjective topics, I would recommend, they're okay to use for if you want to. Um, but for the more objective things that can have life or death consequences or that involve inputting personal information, I would avoid using it for now until there's more regulation around that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question?
Any others? Okay, if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to thank you on behalf of Seniors for Social Action Ontario, Robin. That was a very interesting presentation, and as I said, it'll be available on our YouTube channel in a few days, and I'll also send out the slides. Robin, it's been a pleasure, and I also think it might be interesting to have you back in a year, because I think a whole lot's going to change over the next year as far as AI is concerned, because it's just
Agreed.
expanding in leaps and bounds and getting, in quotes, smarter and smarter.
Agreed.
And so without getting into the scary stuff, we'll just see what it's like in a year. Anyway, much appreciated, Robin.
Appreciate it.
Thank you
Very
very
Thank
much.
lovely.
you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for the invitation.
You're
Thanks,
quite welcome.
everyone.